Before we begin, I want to clarify that this is part 1 of a 2-part Halloween special, the second part of which will be coming out on Halloween. That is also the deadline for the fan art contest. Remember to use hashtag DMutedFanArt on Twitter for a chance to appear in part 2 of my Halloween special. 5 winners will be chosen, and of course, thank you to everyone who decides to enter. Anyway, let me tell you about spooky season. Last Halloween, I was bright-eyed and ignorant to most issues plaguing this disgusting horror landscape I've cemented myself in. And when I did my Halloween special, I was covering Five Nights at Freddy's content. Not like I'd still be covering that. Oh. I think this Halloween, I'm gonna switch things up, cover something else. After all, FNAF doesn't really scare me so much anymore. I need to talk about something that actually does scare me. But what scares me? What would really send me to my limit? What game could I possibly play that would make me shit my pants in abstract, unrelenting horror?
What's the time? Playtime!
Oh god. Well, if I'm gonna suffer through this, I'm not gonna do it alone. Time to send out those Halloween party invitations. I'll just tell people I'm playing the scariest game ever. I mean, what could be scarier than mediocrity?
Hey, we got your invite in the mail.
What the hell? I didn't send you an invite. I haven't sent anyone an invite yet. I haven't even written them out yet.
So anyway, Bobo and I heard you were playing the scariest game ever.
Well,
And
I mean...
never knew! You own a 3DS.
What? Why would I need a 3DS?
What, you mean you don't own a copy of the scariest game of all time, Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon?
Yeah, I've said before that I would never cover Poppy Playtime. But never say never, I guess. Yes, this is the game I'm going to play this Halloween because nothing scares me more than the abysmal state of indie horror. But hey, it's not Ban 4, so I must be doing something right. Poppy Playtime is one of the most okay games I've ever played. Don't get me wrong, it's not cracking any top 10 lists out there, but hey, it's actually not terrible. This is something I complimented Mob Games and Poppy on before, but there's undeniable quality in this game that makes me kind of really appreciate it, especially in regards to what would come after it. Regardless of my feelings on either franchise, Poppy Playtime undoubtedly had a better, more stable release than Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach. Poppy Playtime came out about 2 years ago on October 12th, 2021, about 2 months before Security Breach. It was developed by Mob Games, the game development division of Mob Entertainment. If that name sounds familiar, it's because Mob Entertainment has had a long history before and after Poppy, originating as an animation company that specializes in Minecraft animations. Mob would eventually absorb the studio's Zamination as well, and the two would work to produce various videos and series revolving around mascot horror characters, and other things, in Minecraft-style animations. Now, I'm not about to act like I watch any of this stuff, but I do think this is the best summation of everyone's initial thoughts about Poppy Playtime. It was made by the studio that made Puppet Date's Purple Guy Fazbear and Friends Shorts number 1 through 20 compilation. Jesus Christ, that hurt to say out loud. I think that when Poppy came out, it was just generally a bad time frame. FNAF fans were waiting for their watered-down kiddie version of horror that would disgust virtually everyone, and here comes Poppy doing it 2 months early. By this point in time, the mascot horror genre was at its driest. The last FNAF game at that point was Help Wanted, and that was 2 years beforehand. Bendy's final chapter was 3 years beforehand, and Secret Neighbor existed, but really, who cared about Secret Neighbor? At this point, probably the most current name at that time was the Roblox game Piggy, and that's just depressing to think about. These weird semi-Peppa Pig models were the face of mascot horror at the time, and then here comes Poppy, which seemed somewhat promising. The main monster design was a hit, instantly recognizable and pretty scary in the right context. But then the game came out, and oh my god, what a mess. The biggest thing people had to talk about with Poppy Playtime was the big-ass merch button on the starting screen. What a joke. Now, I'm not saying Poppy didn't deserve merchandise. In fact, it's one of the few mascot horror series out there where I would say it was 100% justified, since the story itself is based around a toy factory. But it was a very easy piece of this game to latch onto and criticize. Let's be real, this game was horror for kids, and attaching a toy store to the start screen of your game is gonna make heads turn, because that is very blatantly money farming. Of course little Timmy is gonna spend all of Dad's hard-earned moolah on Huggy Wuggy. That was on top of the price of admission anyway, with the first chapter coming out at a somewhat steep $5 for what was a 30-minute demo being real. I think this was because Mob wanted to at least pretend like they were appealing to people with their own debit cards, like they felt Poppy would be respected by an adult fanbase if it cost money to play their game, when in reality, it was kind of the opposite. The other big thing in general was just how quickly Poppy had grown. It really did seem to just spring up overnight, and with it came a ton of marketing, products, and at the time, NFTs. Now, I'm not going to get into a whole thing about what an NFT is, but basically people were supposed to buy pictures that they didn't actually own and could be taken down at any time. NFTs on its own, I mean, that wasn't really a good look for mob games, and I think they knew as much, as they expressed regret over it pretty much as soon as those NFTs were available for purchase. This is something I have criticized mob for in the past, but I really should emphasize that these NFTs weren't the decisions of the people actually making the game. More likely, they were the decisions of suits who wanted more cash in their pockets. What made these NFTs particularly egregious, however, was how they capitalized on one of Mascot Horror's biggest selling points: lore. Buying these NFTs would let someone in on a piece of the puzzle, ultimately revealing the phrase "Mommy Longlegs is coming," or something like that. I wouldn't know, I never bothered with these things. But all of this, and what is the game actually like? Well, let's get started with the beginning of Chapter 1, and then move on to Chapter 2. Let's see what the creators of Purple Girl Shark Attack, Water Drop Emoji, Fazbear and Friends Shorts number 1 through 21 compilation have in store for us. Holy shit. So, Poppy Playtime Chapter 1 is a game. It exists, it functions. Why is this so popular again? I'm kidding, but all jokes aside, nothing about Chapter 1 is necessarily all that memorable. The puzzles with the hands are okay, if a little cryptic at first, and I genuinely just did not care for most places I was traversing. One thing I will give Poppy credit for though is how it handles tension. A lot of this game is played in total silence, with a few loud noises here and there to keep you on edge. Probably the best tension building element of the game, however, comes with meeting Huggy. More specifically, when you meet him and then unmeet him because now he's gone. That's cool. If you can't tell by now, I'm really searching for something special and unique to say that separates Poppy from the dozens of other indie titles just like it, but there's just nothing there. The grab pack is probably the only part of this game that I can say makes it stick out definitively. The extendable hands are just straight up fun to use, even if they are a bit buggy, and sometimes redundant. It can be a lot of fun to just mess around with these things and throw objects around, but this is a horror game. Where does the horror element come into play? Well, Poppy doesn't really try for these horrific moments all that often, and that's fine by me. I mean, this is supposed to be the first chapter. It's meant to ease you into the horror, not come out right with it. That being said, there is one moment that cannot be described as anything other than horror, and that's the ending chase sequence. With very little left in the chapter, your task is to make a toy to unlock a door. However, on the other side of the door is Huggy Wuggy, now chasing you. Once you get into a vent on the far side of the room, the chase starts. This chase doesn't last for too long, but I think it does a good job. It's tricky your first time through, and Huggy is a genuine threat during it. The ending of this chase is also really climactic, as you utilize your grab hands to slam a box down on Huggy just as he reaches you, knocking him down the catwalks. It's a climactic end to an intense chase. Overall, not a bad 30 minutes, but the game's not over yet. In one final long hallway, we meet the title character of the game, Poppy herself. And yes, I am going to have a lot to say about her. As for Huggy though, I do have to admit, I really like this character. Do I think he's scary? Well, not usually. In the vents he can be pretty threatening, but I think that might just be because he's very fast and this vent scene is very cramped. But otherwise, it's definitely a good design to scare kids with, and I do think that is important towards staying power, but otherwise he's got an amazing silhouette and his design is so simple and recognizable, he makes for a really strong contender for a main antagonist, or at least main monster. However, I will have to take a little detour from Poppy Playtime to talk about Huggy's effect outside of his own game, because I do think it's been for the worse. At its core, Huggy's design is very simple on the outside. He's got a blue body, long limbs, yellow hands and feet, 2 eyes, and a pair of bright red lips. On its own, this is a simple design to grasp and it translates well to many different art styles. He can be friendly looking, he can be monstrous, depending on how you warp these individual traits. But the effect on Mascot Horror that Huggy had is abysmal. Let's face it, without Huggy, we don't have Jumbo Josh. When horror characters get boiled down to a bright color, 2 eyes, and a mouth, who do we really have to blame other than Huggy? And that's the worst part, because like I keep reiterating, his design is actually really good, but Mascot Horror is like dog breeding. You might start with a wolf, but eventually you're gonna get a pug. Weird analogy, I know, but I think it fits in this case. The same can't be said for Poppy, however. Poppy's design is less like a pug and more like a slightly smaller wolf, but it also feels way less original than that first wolf. While I'm going to try and reserve my thoughts on her character for Chapter 2, since she appears physically in Chapter 1, I do feel comfortable talking about her design. It's just not good. Okay, so Huggy has a really unique and recognizable silhouette and character design. What does Poppy have? An identity problem. Stop me if you've heard this before, but in Chapter 1, Poppy is the centerpiece of the story and shows up for almost none of it. She has a bright white face and red pigtails, and was made to entertain children, and when she talks to you, she only does so when you can't physically see her talking on screen. It's very clear that Poppy is heavily inspired by Circus Baby from the FNAF series, something that is no secret at Mob. And I think it's okay to have characters inspired by other series, but I think this is a huge problem because of who this character actually is. Poppy is the title character of the game, the face that, when it comes out, is probably going to be one of the first things that comes up when you search the series name. And if she just looks like Circus Baby, people are just going to assume there's no originality here. There's nothing that separates her visually from Baby in a way that's very interesting. Sure, Poppy is a doll, and Baby is a robot, but I don't think that really cuts it. Maybe I'm wrong on this, I'm certainly not a game dev myself. I just think that the title character of your video game should probably not look almost exactly like one of the main characters of another larger horror game in your own field and space, who your company has a history of using in its own fan animations. It makes Poppy feel way less like her own original character, and way more like Mob said, we need a Circus Baby, let's just put her in. One other way the game starts to win me back a little though, is in the story. Okay, let's be straight with it, the setup is basically identical to Bendy and the Ink Machine. You are playing as a former employee of insert corrupt company meddling with science they know nothing about here, and after years of being away from the job, you're called back when a letter reaches you. The odd part, every single employee of insert corrupt company meddling with science they know nothing about here vanished all at once without a trace. Yeah, it's the same setup. But I will admit that beyond that, Poppy's story is actually really interesting to look into. I can't believe I said that out loud. Specifically regarding this character called the Prototype, who it seems may be the overarching villain of the game. He's mentioned first in Chapter 1 and then partially seen in Chapter 2, and even has some dialogue in Project Playtime. All we know about him in Chapter 1 though was that he was being contained by scientists at Playtime Co., but through some way related to coordination and cooperation with other experiments, it managed to escape. The resulting slaughter seems to be the event that caused every Playtime Co. employee to go missing. I actually really like this explanation as it answers one question that seems unoriginal at first, but then asks another. How did this happen? What is the prototype? That may genuinely be the only mystery in this game I give any resemblance of a crap about, but I do give a resemblance of a crap about it. Otherwise though, meh. Most of the story is told through these tapes, and most don't have a lot to say. The prototype story is told on one of them, which is cool, but most others are either tutorial tapes or irrelevant to much. There is an interesting one though about this woman named Stella, and I only say interesting because I don't really get it. Okay, so first up, she has the same VA as Poppy, which apparently led a lot of people to believe that Stella is Poppy. There's a whole thing about how the toys are actually human experiments, but let's continue. Anyway, what I mean is that in Stella's tape, she constantly switches between accents. It was just very jarring to hear the first time through, and I don't want to fault the VA Nola Klopp here. Her performance as Poppy and Stella in Chapter 2 is damn near perfect for both characters, but in this one tape, she talks with what sounds like a Spanish or European accent, then switches to almost this California Valley Girl accent, and then switches back to the first one.
Playing with toys when I was young was so magical. I could go straight from my bedroom floor to anywhere in the world. And it's weird, because adults are just kids, but older. I don't think anyone ever really feels like an adult. The oldest people to ever live are still younger than those. So I guess everyone is always young relative to something.
I wouldn't bring it up if it didn't stick out to me, so there. But honestly, all love to the VA, this is just funny to me. All in all, the game itself is not terrible, it's just that like only 5 minutes of it are worth the time of day it takes to play the damn thing. Nothing else really drags praise or compliment out of me. That being said, it's obvious from this chase alone that Mob has horror chops, which is why I expect Chapter 3 will probably end up being everyone's new favorite horror game of all time. As it stands, the biggest thing holding this game back was definitely the price tag and all the negative publicity, as the game itself is inoffensive at worst and actually entertaining at best. Is it good? Not really, but it's not bad. Who really has the energy anymore to tell you that Poppy started a newer, less scary mascot horror crap train? We already knew that. but at the risk of sounding kind of revisionist, I don't think it was ever really deserved. Don't get me wrong, Poppy Playtime has next to nothing going for it, but some of its puzzles are genuinely entertaining. Looking at you, Catwalk's puzzle. Also, both times I beat Chapter 1 in preparation for this video, I managed to apparently glitch it and hit the catwalks before Huggy does, which is apparently a speedrun skip. Weird. I think what makes Poppy Chapter 1 stand out, and the game as a whole really, is its art style. No, it's not amazing, we aren't looking at Borderlands, everything is cel-shaded and comic booky, but there is a consistent feel about the factory that makes it seem charming, even when nothing is really going on. Normally, I'd dock a horror game for this, but considering this is only the first 30 minutes of a larger game, I'm gonna be nicer about it. The tapes make for good collectibles. Every time you grab one, it feels earned. Except when they're the tutorial tapes, but whatever. I think my only real complaints about the environment are just how... Okay, cat time. Cat on my lap. Okay. We're gonna do this Raito style, okay? I think my only real complaints about the environment are just how long it takes to get through them. Especially Make a Friend. Make a Friend requires you to push a button and pull 3 levers. That's it. Then you gotta wait for this slow-ass machine to make a cat bee. You could probably cook a steak in the time it takes to get this part of the game over and done with. This then leads immediately into the best part of the chapter, so I don't really know what happened, but yeah, sure, I needed a piss break. Oh shit, another knock at the door. Oh, hey Lyra. What's up?
Nothing much, just doing some storyboards. What about you?
Playing my Halloween game and all that. You got my invitation then.
Yep, scariest game ever, right? I mean, you obviously mean Hideo Kojima's masterpiece, PT, but I guess we can call it the scariest game ever since those two are just interchangeable anyway. It is PT, right?
It's Poppy Playtime, Lyra. I'm playing Poppy Playtime.
I have no words for you right now.
I have caramel corn.
You brought food? Dude! That's all you had to say. Count me in. Time to hug you some wuggies, motherfucker.
I think I'm actually gonna leave Chapter 2 for next time, as I have to now violently throw up for an hour. If you enjoyed this part 1 of 2, be sure to subscribe. Part 2 drops on October 31st. That's right, Halloween. Until then, stay spooky, and peace.